here we are to talk about Swift. We're on day 5 of our introduction to Swift. We've covered variables, optionals, collection types, structs, classes, enums, and today we're going to talk about SwiftUI. Okay, so we're on lesson 5. I'm going to click the link here and go to our lesson, and we have some slides. So let's go over our slides really quick here. So learning objectives for today are familiarize ourselves with UI's frameworks for UI, okay? Explain what SwiftUI is and how it works with a declarative syntax, build layouts using stacks, create views efficiently using Swift constructs. Oh, pardon me. So Apple has 2 frameworks that they use. They use UIKit and SwiftUI. UIKit is the old guard. It's been around for a long time. It's not going anywhere. SwiftUI is the new one, okay? SwiftUI has limited coverage right now. So it doesn't support the entire API of the whole Apple, iOS, web develop or app development ecosystem, right? UI covers everything, okay? SwiftUI also doesn't work on all iOS devices. It works, I think, on iOS 13 and up. So in the future, Apple's gonna build out the API support, and it's going, and as new operating systems come in, iOS 13 is going to be the old operating system, and everybody's going to have it, and we'll be on iOS 14, 15, 16, right? And they'll all support SwiftUI. So SwiftUI will be here in the future, and it's kind of here today, but it's not sure if it's like 100% ready for production. I think you can use it in production, but maybe not build all apps entirely in SwiftUI. There's probably some small apps you can build in SwiftUI, but if you're building an app that has comprehensive coverage of all the features in the API, SwiftUI is not going to be able to do it. That said, SwiftUI is compatible with UIKit, so you can mix your SwiftUI stuff with your UIKit stuff. So that makes it worth learning now, right? Because it'll be here in the future, and it'll probably be the way that we do things in the future. Right now, it doesn't cover everything, so we can't use it. We have to learn both is the thing, right? We got to learn both of these right now. We're just kind of in an in-between stage, but in the future, we'll want to know SwiftUI. So that's why we're going to cover it in the class right now. We're going to spend 2 classes on SwiftUI, and then we're going to spend the rest of the class on UIKit. Okay. So so SwiftUI is an innovative way to build user interfaces and, across platforms. It works on iOS, it works on the desktop system too, like OS X, right, or OS 10, right? It's got a declarative syntax, so you kind of just write the code to say what you want to create. UIKit doesn't quite have that, okay? It says natural to write, which is good, but it's like the style that you write the code in is a little different than you might be used to. So it does have a learning curve, let's say, right? So it is natural to write, but but getting into that nature, there's a learning curve, okay? Let's see. So side by side, yeah. So you can use SwiftUI and UIKit together, okay? So SwiftUI is the new one, the small one. UIKit is the whole kitchen, right? Design tools. Yeah, so SwiftUI, comes with a couple extra tools in Xcode. So Xcode 11 has a preview mode now, so you don't have to run the iOS simulator. Instead, you can preview your SwiftUI views in the preview window. You'll see what that is in a moment, right? And that's actually really cool. I think they call it Canvas, actually, right? So you can preview in Canvas, and it's actually really quick too. So sometimes it hangs up, and I have some little hiccups, and you have to click a little refresh button, but usually it just updates as you change your code. And what's also cool is that if you click in the canvas, you can edit the objects directly, and then it writes the code for you, right? So you can edit the code and you can edit the objects directly, and that's kind of nice, okay? Yeah, so SwiftUI runs on iOS 13 and up, Mac OS 10, 15, tvOS 13, watch OS 6, and future versions of each. So it's like it's going to be the thing in the future. So when we come out with iOS 14, you can be sure that SwiftUI will be there. SwiftUI is faster than UIKit. I've seen people say that they've done some benchmarks and it's super quick. Okay, so we get a performance boost with SwiftUI. Okay. Um, you can also mix, like I said, you can mix SwiftUI and UIKit together. So SwiftUI does not replace UIKit, at least not yet. Maybe in the future, maybe never though. It depends on how Apple wants to treat it, right? This SwiftUI might just be like an option or a path that you can choose. I suspect that in the future, everything will be this. Like, in the past, um, Apple developed with Objective-C was the language. And then they introduced Swift and they said the same thing. Like you can use the two together, you can use them kind of side by side, and nowadays I think people are developing often in Swift alone because it's just kind of easier and better. So, it took a few years though before that was the case, right? So it's been 6 years. So give us a couple years with SwiftUI and it'll probably take over. That's my prediction. Don't bet on that. I don't have any insiders at Apple, right? What should you learn? Well, for now, you should learn SwiftUI, right? It's got limited API coverage and limited adoption. But in the future, again, I think it's going to be the up and coming thing. Yeah, and maybe in 2 or 3 years, right? I don't know what the job situation is on this, like how many jobs would ask you to use SwiftUI. I think probably most places would expect you to like know UIKit backwards and forwards, and then also have a little bit of experience with SwiftUI, right? So, they both would be good, but they really like if they had a person that was a stronger UIKit developer, that would probably get hired first, right? Let's see here. Oh, let's talk about stacks, right? So let's get into a demo with SwiftUI and try it out. I'm going to open up Xcode and make a brand new project. Actually, before we make the new project, let's look at a project that we're going to make. So I'm going to open up this project here, and this is my code here, and this is the preview window. I'm going to wait for my preview. I guess maybe I got to click the resume button here. This is the canvas, right? Oh, there we go. So there's my canvas. And what I want you to do is to create this calculator, right? We'll do a couple examples to see how this works, but basically to make the calculator here, this is all the code that I wrote, okay? Which is actually not that much code for drawing the whole interface, right? And there's a few things here. If we thought about the calculator as groups of buttons, you can see when I click on this H stack, that stands for horizontal stack, you can see there's a blue line around this row of buttons, okay? So there's a row of buttons there, and then if I click on this one, you can see I've got another H stack row of buttons, right? So H stack stands for horizontal stack, so we use it to arrange some objects in a row, a horizontal row, right? If you're familiar with web development, this is kind of like Flexbox, okay? It's a little different, but it's similar, okay? If you're familiar with iOS and UIKit, it's like a stack view, okay? So you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 horizontal stacks, right? Actually, this is a horizontal stack here too, up at the top. So there's like one more, so there's 5. So I got a horizontal stack, stack, horizontal stack, another horizontal stack, and another one, okay? And you can see that this looks kind of like a function. So I say horizontal stack, I have some parameters, and then I have a block, okay, that it renders. The whole thing, all of these stacks are actually contained inside of a VStack. So you can see I have a VStack here that has a blue box that wraps around everything. And that VStack stands for a vertical stack, okay? There's a little gap at the top here because this is the safe area, or the it's the UI area that shows the status bar, which has like the time and the battery percentage and your your Wi-Fi connection or whatever it is, right? So that's at the top there. That's why there's a little gap there, okay? And then actually I have the whole thing. I have this VStack contains the 5 horizontal rows. So I got one vertical row containing 5 horizontal rows. And then I have one Z stack. So Z stack is like layers that stack one in front of the other, right? Going into the like depth into the screen on the computer, right? So I added this one Z stack here to set the background color, right? So the first horizontal stack here contains the number, like if we were creating the calculator app, this one has the number that you might type in. Oops, I have a mistake here. That should be a 5. Shoot. I made a mistake, right? Let's fix that one. 4, 5, there we go. Oh yeah, and then you see it updates immediately. So this is the number at the top, and when I render that number, like I say text to create a text object, and then I pass in the text that I want to display, and then I follow it up with these calls to other functions. So this is the declarative syntax. So I say dot font, and then I say what font I want, and I pass in some value here, right? And then I say foreground color is white. That's the color of the digits, right? And then I can say dot frame, and then my frame, this is kind of a long line, but everything from here to here is one function called a frame. So I say the minimum width, the ideal width, the max width, the height, minimum height, ideal height, max height, alignment, okay? And then that kind of arranges this, right? So I'm aligning bottom trailing. So bottom is the vertical, trailing is the right side, leading would be on the left side, right? So it could be top trailing if I wanted to put that on the top there, I think, right? And there we go, right? So let me undo that, kind of like it at the bottom. Okay, great. These look a little different down here because this, you can see this block of code is actually pretty long, right? Oh, and I forgot to mention I added some padding there. So padding, add some padding. You can put a number in here too, but I just said padding and it gives me the default value. And that's why I have a little bit of space here, right? You know, if I was to take this off, you can see like the space at the bottom between the number and the blue line right there kind of shrunk, right? But if I put the padding back in, it adds a little more space, right? So that padding comes from the system. There's a default value, and you can actually type in your own value in here if you want, right? I'm going to just leave it with the defaults. It's kind of nice actually if you go with the default colors and styles and things, because then all the apps kind of look the same and they fit the phone. And the numbers change depending on what screen size you have, so you don't have to calculate those numbers, right? So wherever possible, it's good for us to use the system values. And that's actually what I'm doing here with the font also. So when I set text and then I call font, I'm going to set the font right here, right? And what I did is I got a system value and I want to use the system size of 48. So I'm saying use system font size 48, right? So what the system font is, you know, I'm not sure. It's probably San Francisco, right? But I don't have to say San Francisco, right? And if, you know, if I could say any font, then, you know, people would be using, you know, Comic Sans and Papyrus, and, you know, you see all these kooky fonts, right? So it's good we use the system font. And then if Apple changes the font, like in the past, they used Helvetica Neue or Avenir or something like that. And nowadays they're using San Francisco. So as they update their UI, if you download a new system on your iPhone and it has a new font style, then this would actually pick up on that font style. I wouldn't have to rewrite my app for that. Okay. Okay, great. Let's talk about one more aspect of this example, right? So I have some buttons here, and these buttons are not using the same arrangement here, right? So what I did is at the bottom here, I added a function called make button. I'm actually going to close this side here, right? So I'm going to add a function here called make button, and my make button function has a few parameters. It takes the label with a default value of 0. It takes the width, which is a CG float with a value of 70 default, and a height, which is the value of 70, which is the default value. And then it returns a view, right? Or some kind of view, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to return, and this is a little tricky. We're not going to get super into this, but in order for me to return any type of view here, or I guess a Swift UI style view, I have to do some view as the return type, and then do any view here and wrap my button. So the Swift UI code here is this button object. So kind of like that text object in those stack views that we saw above, you can create a button and you say button, and it takes an action and a label. I'm ignoring the action right now, so I just have nothing going on there, right? And then the label is a text object, right? And my label variable comes in here and sets the text. So this text right here is the same as what we were using up here, right? And I could have written like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, we'll count these lines: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code for each one of these, which would have been pretty long, right? So that would have been 6 times the amount of lines that I have here. So instead, what I did is I made a function for it, right? So my function can return the button and configure it. Essentially, all the buttons are the same. I didn't do this here, but the next step would be to add another parameter that lets you set the color, right? So we can make maybe the numerals like a different color from the operations, right? Maybe I need another row with the clear and the percent. I forgot the row. Oh, well, never mind. So anyway, so here we are. I've got my button, it's got the text right here. I'm setting the frame. It's using the values that come into this function to set the width, the height, and the alignment. Or I guess I'm not setting alignment, it's always set to center. And then I set the foreground color. That's the color we see on the button for the text. The background color is orange. I'd like to make this a variable up here. Corner radius lets us round the button. Without this, all the buttons should be square, right? So that's just going to round them. And I took the height of the button and divided by 2 to get the corner radius, right? And then I set the font, and then I set the padding, right? So I gave like a little bit of space around the buttons, right? Okay, so that was like a quick walkthrough of how you might write some code in SwiftUI. There's a lot to take in there, okay? There's a lot to take in. I know that. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from scratch and just look at some of the ideas, like maybe just styling a text box first, and then we'll work our way up to making a complex layout. So this layout's like pretty complicated, right? It's a 2-dimensional layout, like this other button is twice the size right there, and everything has a style behind it, right? Backing it up to draw it, right? So anyway, thanks for watching. I'm going to start the next demo in the next video because this video has gone on for long enough, right? So anyway, I'll see you in that video, and good luck with all of your Swift UI projects.